Three things I want to share briefly. Number one, only the real king knows and controls the future. God in chapter 2 said, here's the future. Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 3 says, I have an alternate rendering for the future. Only God knows and controls the future. The future that Nebuchadnezzar, as the most powerful dictator on the earth, tried to create, he did not have the power to do so because nothing can overcome an all-powerful God and his intent for the future. Number two, everyone wants to be a king with a kingdom that they rule over and control. We all do. If you look at Nebuchadnezzar, you're like, I can't believe he did that. If you had his power and his money, we would be experiencing the same thing. Okay? This is where ultimately he wants to be a king, he wants a kingdom, and he wants total control. He wants everyone and everything to do it the way that he wants. We all do this. Some of us try at work. We try to set it up so that we are in control. It doesn't work. We come home. We try to set it up that we're in control. That doesn't work. So then we coach Little League and bully 10-year-old boys. That's what we do in Scottsdale. We bully 10-year-old boys so that we are the king and they're under our dominion and we have control. Okay? I'm going to offend you, and if I haven't, just be patient. I'll get there in a moment. Number three, people who don't know God end up worshiping other people. And that's what he's saying. Everybody bow down and worship me, the image of me. The image of me. We're not supposed to worship a human being or the image of any human being. Colossians says that Christ is the image of the invisible God. If you want to worship someone, worship Jesus. If you want to worship the image of something, worship Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God. And that ultimately people that don't know how to worship God, they worship people. We call this fear of man, people-pleasing, codependent relationships. You are in control. I exist to meet your needs. Please don't pour out your wrath on me. I just live for your pleasure. How should I bow down? This is not just a Babylonian problem. This is a human problem. This is not just a historical problem. This is an eternal problem. In addition, they have counterfeit worship. We see that in Daniel 3, 4 through 7, in the herald. So he's the counterfeit preacher. He's got my job. His job is to get up and talk. The herald proclaimed aloud, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound, and they're going to go through the band. So here's the counterfeit worship team. It's the counterfeit worship team, and they're going to have counterfeit church. Here's the instruments, the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon. If you know what that is, please tell me, bring it. I'd love to hear it. The harp, the bagpipes, so the Scots showed up. You know, this is going to get interesting real quick. And every kind of music. And some people say, why do we need to have a band? Because Satan does. Why do we need to have a sound system? Because Satan does. And I think that ours should be at least as good because our king is more worthy. Right? If Satan's going to throw church, then we should throw better church. That's what I'm saying. So bring your bagpipe. All right. You are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Let me just tell you that their worship really went to another level on this occasion. Previously, there were some guys checking their phone. I wonder if the Cardinals are going to get a good draft pick. I wonder what's going on with the impeachment trials. On this occasion, they were all singing because it was two options, sing or burn. Okay, we're singing. Now, we're not going to do that today, but I would still like you to sing, right? Not because you're going into a fiery furnace if you don't, but because of Jesus, you don't have to worry about any fiery furnace. Okay? It goes on. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, they keep saying these instruments over and over. I think it's written by a guy who works at Guitar Center. He's really into the details. And every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Counterfeit preacher, he's the herald. And he commanded counterfeit worship, banned in church, counterfeit Jesus. What he is saying is all peoples from all nations, tribes, and tongues need to bow down and worship the great Nebuchadnezzar. This is the counterfeit Jesus. In Revelation chapter 7, and Revelation connects with Daniel. Daniel tells us the future, and then Revelation shows us the future. If you know the story of Revelation in chapter 7, verse 9, it says that there is a real king named Jesus ruling over a real kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, seated on a real throne and being worshiped by people from all nations, tribes, tongues, languages, and peoples. He just wants to be Jesus. He just wants to be Jesus. And he wants everyone to worship him as ultimately we were created to worship Jesus. And here, this is counterfeit evangelism. This is the demonic equivalent of a Billy Graham rally. I love Billy Graham. He's with Jesus today. He's having a great day. Right? His faith became sight. He doesn't regret preaching Jesus right now. I promise you that. I got to meet Billy Graham when I was a college student. I got to go out and visit him just shortly before his death, maybe a few years before. I'll never forget sitting at my first Billy Graham rally. Stadium is full, tens of thousands of people, unbelievable. They're singing and worship and proclamation, and then everybody needs to publicly declare if they are going to worship Jesus. It was one of the most moving things I've ever seen in my whole life. This is the demonic equivalent of a Billy Graham rally. There are hundreds of thousands of people. And then they make the altar call. Okay, who's going to worship Nebuchadnezzar? You can't all come forward because there's too many of you. Just bow down where you are. And everyone who bows down, they are converting to the worship of Satan, demons, and the spirit of Babylon that ultimately is empowering the work of Nebuchadnezzar. This is incredibly, incredibly spiritual. And what the herald says is, convert or die. Convert or die. Some years ago, Grace and I had dinner with a dear man named Chuck Colson. He's since gone home to be with the Lord. He's a political leader who got saved later in life and talked a lot about Jesus and did some tremendous work. But as we were having dinner, he said, do you know the difference between Christianity and other religions? I said, what might that be? He said, Christianity is about proposition. Other religions are about imposition. It's always stuck with me. Imposition is convert or die. Proposition is what a man does when he wants to marry a woman. He proposes a loving relationship. Jesus proposes a loving relationship. He does not impose that kind of submission and surrender of the knee without ultimately a surrender and submission of the heart. See, what Nebuchadnezzar wants is outward, what Jesus wants is inward. You can make people obey, but you can't make people love. They need to make that choice for themselves. This is the same spirit that is running Islamic terrorism, global jihad, and things like ISIS. They literally show up to the Christians and say, in this same area of Iran and Iraq, that the story takes place 2,600 years ago, that same spirit is still at work today, telling Christians, convert or die. And many are being murdered and martyred. You need to know that you have a choice to make regarding who your God is and who you will worship. And he proposes a loving relationship. His is a kingdom based upon proposition, not imposition. Now, let me say this as well. Sometimes when we read older books of the Bible, we can think that this is just sort of interesting history. But the Bible doesn't just tell us what happened, but it tells us rather what always happens, as I said, because the same Spirit is at work behind the scenes. I was in my study this week preparing the sermon, and I felt like the Holy Spirit brought to my mind some images. I started seeing some things that I've seen over the years, and all of a sudden I realized that the spirit of Babylon is still at work. I'll show you. Korea, North Korea. Does that look familiar? North Korea. It is a spirit of Babylon state where the dictator rules as God and oversees that which is political and spiritual. And you bow down to him or you die. Next slide. This is Turkmenistan. May not know where it's at. Iraq, which is Babylon. Iran, which is next door, which is Persia. Turkmenistan, next door. This is the king riding in on a horse to set up a kingdom. If you know the Bible, I'll just say this, that's a copyright infringement. That's exactly what that is. That's a copyright infringement. Jesus shows up on a horse. This is a counterfeit. Same spirit at work. How about the next one? China. Look familiar? How many of your mind just exploded? Say, how come these same things keep happening? Because the same spirits are still working. Nations change, kings and kingdoms change, but the spirits don't. Last one, This was in Iraq. This was in Babylon. This was Saddam Hussein until his image was toppled and taken down. Okay, now, let me say something very offensive. That's not an apology. That's just a clue. Okay, that's just a clue. All around the valley are Mormon temples. They are demonic counterfeits with a different Jesus. They have repositioned themselves as a church denomination. Don't call us Mormons. Call us the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. No, because the church are the people who belong to the real Jesus. On top of every temple is what? Golden angel Moroni, a demon in gold, in authority and dominion, ruling over that place for the wrong kingdom. Just because you drive by it all the time, don't get too familiar with it. And have the heart of Daniel and his friends. They didn't hate Nebuchadnezzar or Babylon. They knew that their war was not against flesh and blood, but powers, principalities, and spirits, and that they were there to love the Babylonians and bring them the love of God. Okay? Pray for the temples, pray for your Mormon neighbors and friends, and have the conversation about the real Jesus. Okay? Because we want them to meet the real king and be part of the real kingdom and not under the demonic authority of a ruling and reigning counterfeit spirit that is literally the spirit of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, a spirit of gold ruling over a false religious service with a false band and a false herald and false evangelism. Cults are nothing more than counterfeits.
Hey, howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.